This is an overview of Death of Ivan Ilyich. It's a very simple story. But it begins in medias res, which means in Latin, in the middle of things. It was written by Leo Tolstoy, who is also the man that wrote Anna Karenina. He is also the man that wrote The Great War and Peace. During Tolstoy's time, there were three major groups. There was the aristocracy, there was the political group, there was the social group. There were many different groups. And this, of course, was during the time of the Tsar Alexander, and later on, and earlier rather, Tsar Nicholas. His stories were very spiritual. Later on in his life, he became a Christian, and he and his wife had very differing views. All of his works have to do with man coming to a realization, to a revelation, that life is more important than money or than anything else. Or money is not more important than family, than friends. In Anna Karenina, if you ever plan to read it, it's the story of a woman who falls in love with a younger man. She's married to a man that is very old. It was an arranged marriage. And she begs him to let her leave and go to her young lover. And she wants to divorce him. Of course, she cannot. He takes her children away from her, and she becomes an outcast. She throws herself under a train because money did not mean more to her than her family. Now, this is a very similar story. I'm going to give you an overview, and then you should be able to read it on your own. This is the story of the average man, the common man, and he dies. Excuse me just a minute. Sorry about that. Forgot the television was on. Okay, now, this is a story of a man who is an average man, an ordinary man, but all of his life, he has worked and worked and worked to have more than he has, because money was the important thing to him. The more money he had, the better he would be. The more money he had, the better their life would be. He marries his wife, Prasklova, you find out, simply because she's pretty, she's a good dancer, and her family's going to give some dowry to come with her. There's not anything that he cares about in his life more than material possessions and making money. He becomes very, very ill. He becomes very sick. He does not know why. He goes to doctor after doctor after doctor. He had been a judge, actually, and an attorney. And he finds out that nobody cares if he lives or dies, because he has not cared about anyone in his life. He thinks today, modern day, we'd probably say he had cancer or he had leukemia or something of that order. But back then, he was so incensed with having more money and gaining a higher and higher status in society that he was getting a new townhouse or a new house, and he didn't want his wife to come. And so he fell hanging curtains and hit his side. And he never felt good after that. And of course, you, the reader, we know now that that probably is not what caused his cancer or what happened to him. But he has a problem, and he is ill after that time. We start with his death. We start with his funeral. And then the story is in medias res. It really starts in the middle, or maybe at the end, in medias res, in the middle of things. But we go back through flashbacks, which are sections of a story that are told that happened previously before the story is written. The story begins with his death. Gentlemen, Ivan Ilyich has died. His closest friend at work is Peter Ivanovich. We find out Ivan Ilyich had been a colleague of the gentleman present and was liked by them all. He'd been ill for some weeks with an illness said to be incurable. Now, the only two concerns of his colleagues, they are not, oh my God, my good friend Ivan died, sob, sob. They are concerned for two reasons. First of all, who will get Ivan's job? Who out of them will be the next one to be hired for that upper position? The second thing is everybody goes, "Phew, I'm glad it was him and not me." So is Ivan revered by his comrades? No. They like him okay, but he does not have that aura of love, of being cherished. We find out, and we are very critical of Praskovia in the beginning, because the only thing she cares about is finding out if her husband is going to have a pension. When Peter Ivanovich, who really wants to go play whist, which is a game like bridge, instead of coming to the to pay his respects to the wife, but he comes anyway. And that's what he thinks is, I wonder who'll get Ivan's job, and I'm glad he died and it was not me. But when the wife comes to speak to him, and he's, we go and do things we don't want to do. I have plenty of times I've had to go to the funeral home or gone to a funeral. And if you can't, my dad used to say, if you can't go with the right attitude, you might as well stay at home. But Peter is very upset. He entered, like everyone else on such occasions, feeling uncertain of what he would have to do. The last time he had called on Ivan, Peter Ivanovich had seen Gerasim in the study. Ilyich had been particularly fond of him, and he was performing the duty of a sick nurse. You're going to find out that the only person, as Ivan is going to die, because it is his death, that he dies, is you're going to find out the only person that he truly cares about, other than his son, who is very young and does not play a primary role in the story, but is this little peasant boy named Gerasim. Now, of course, if you know anything about Tolstoy, you know that this was written he was Russian. And of course, Leo started out his life. Let me go back and tell you a couple of things about Tolstoy. I apologize. He was a gambler, a womanizer. He was an aristocrat, a vegetarian. He was an advocate for poor people, for the peasantry, people like Gerasim. And I think this is why in this story, Gerasim is the one person that he cares about as the story ends. He spent his life very, very lonely. This was a tribute to his friend George Sand. George Sand's real name was Marianne Elliott, and she wrote Silas Marna and Mill on the Floss. This was her pen name. Women did not publish back during this time except by pen names, and Tolstoy died in 1910, right on the verge of World War I. And so therefore we see here that he lost his mother and he lost his father, and his uncle gave him some money to come and study with him. He married a famous writer, and later on, after he found Christianity, she became extremely angry because he was going to leave his money to more or less a charitable contribution than instead of giving the money to her. So let's go back. We are looking here at Praskovia actually being his wife, if you want to look at it in that manner. So Peter Ivanovich is saying, man, I really sacrificed a whole bunch to come here to this wake. And look at the description of Ivan. In your book, this is on 814. The dead man lay, as dead men lie, in a coffin, his rigid head sunk into the soft cushions of the coffin. His yellow waxen brow, bald patches over his sunken temples. He was changed, but the one thing that Peter notices in his pitifully physical state is that there is an expression on his face of peace. Now, Peter cannot understand this. The Praskovia calls Peter in, and they have all this furniture. It's kind of the furniture that we would say that old people have today that they don't want you to use. It's really for looks. If your grandma or grandpa had plastic on their furniture, as mine did growing up, because they wanted it to look pretty and they didn't care if you sat on it, but they didn't want it to get dirty. It really was for show, and there was no real feeling in it. But she is very selfish. She is a martyr. Look at her description. I looked after everything myself. I consider it an affectation to say that my grief prevents mine from attending to my practical affairs. He screamed and screamed. I could not bear it. It was unendurable. I cannot understand how I bore it. If you could hear him 3 rooms off. It's not about how sick Ivan was. It's not about how bad Ivan felt. It's about how bad what she put up with. She's a martyr. She is selfish. And Peter keeps thinking it could have been him. Now, the wife wants to know how to get money. She asks Peter. She says, oh, Peter, how hard it is, how terribly, how hard. But she says, but my main concern is she wanted to know how she could obtain a grant of money from the government on the occasion of her husband's death. And she wanted Peter Ivanovich's advice. We meet the daughter. She was in black and slim figure. She had a gloomy, determined, angry expression. She is angry because she is supposed to get married. And her father being sick and her father dying has messed up her marriage plans. Now, this is very horrible that nobody here seems to care about the father except the little boy who is 13 or 14, and he is very sad. But then Peter meets Gerasim. Well, friend Gerasim, it's a sad affair. Look what Gerasim said. He is also a Christian. Hence, to bring about, this is when Tolstoy wrote this, he is telling you, the reader, his wife didn't care about anything but material things. His daughter didn't. His family didn't. Nobody did except this little peasant boy who has nothing. He says, it's God's will, we'll all shall come to it one day. So Peter goes to play whist, and he forgets about Ivan. We find out that in the flashback in section 2 of Ivan's life, that his life had been simple, it had been ordinary. He works very hard. He finally becomes a member of the court of justice. He is a sinner. He loves wine, women, and song. He wants to become higher and higher. And he's climbing the ladder of success. And as I tell you, I'm giving you an overview. He was a magistrate. And he finally met Praskovia, and he married her. She was most attractive, clever, and brilliant girl of the set with which he moved. Now, we are told that she could dance. So at the end of the evening, he danced with Praskovia, and it was chiefly during these dances that he captivated her. She fell in love with him, and he thought, well, I need to marry somebody. I'll just marry her, but he does not love her. She came from a good family, not bad looking, and had some property. She was well connected, was a sweet, pretty, and thoroughly correct young lady. So he got married. Was Ivan madly in love with her? Absolutely not. But from the first month when they got married, only 2 out of their 5 children lived. He worked all the time. She was left at home to raise these children. When a child died, it was, oh, well, we'll have another one. And so they lost 3 more babies. They did not have a great deal of money. And he never spent any time with her or helped her. The chief thing was that he had only his official duties. He was only concerned with work because he didn't want to be a family man. He just wanted to be seen and heard and let everybody know how important he was. So this was the way their lives went for 17 years. He felt his salary of 3,500 rubles was not enough, and he wanted to make more money, and he finally got a job making 5,000 rubles a year and a salary in which he would have moving expenses. And so he moves to St. Petersburg. Now, this is not St. Petersburg, Florida. This is St. Petersburg in Russia. Everybody is jealous of him. And he oversees this new home before he brings his wife and family with meticulous detail. He is every detail he oversees, it has to be perfect. And the key to what happens to him, once when mounting a stepladder to show the upholsterer who did not understand how he wanted the hangings draped, he made a false step and slipped. But now this is irony, being a strong and agile man, he clung on and only knocked his side against the knob of the window pane. But he's so excited about this new house that there's another statement that he makes very ironical. It's a good thing I'm a bit of an athlete. Another man might have been killed, but I merely knocked myself. Just here, it hurts when it's touched, but it's passing off already. It's only a bruise. Okay, now, they quarreled all the time. They have a party to introduce, he does their open house when they move in, and he criticizes his wife severely. She never does anything right. He fusses at her. He criticizes her every move. He has never been a husband to her, a father when their children died, a father that would help them. He has only cared about himself. So before we get down on Praskovia as the story begins, let's not be too harsh on her, because now you're seeing how you're going to change your attitude toward her. And we are told that they lived and all went well and life flowed pleasantly. And sometimes Ivan begins to feel bad. She said that, because he feels bad, he's in a bad mood all the time. He has a terrible temper. Having come to the conclusion that her husband had a dreadful temper and made her life miserable, she began to feel sorry for herself. And the more she felt sorry for herself, the more she hated her husband. She began to wish he would die. She didn't want him to die, because if he died, the money would stop. So this is a paradox here. And he goes to a doctor. And the doctor treats Ivan just as he has treated everyone else in his life. Oh, they don't know what it is. This is humorous to us. They say it's a floating kidney, or a chronic catarrh, or appendicitis. And so they just decide, well, they give him a little medicine and they think it'll get better. And of course, the more he hurts, the angrier he is. He goes to all of these doctors. From the time of his visit to the doctor, Ivan's chief occupation was the exact fulfillment of the doctor's instructions regarding his hygiene, his medicine, his pain, and his excretions. The pain did not grow less, but Ivan tried to think it was better. His disease progressed. All the doctors said the same thing, which was basically nothing. Oh, take this medicine and maybe you'll feel better. Praskova's attitude toward Ivan was that it was his own fault and he was annoying her with his illness. We can stop if you're tired, take a rest. No, he wasn't going to take a rest. He had to live alone on the brink of an abyss, with no one who understood or pitied him. He is missing something in his life. He does not know what it is. His brother-in-law visits in section 5 and cannot believe how he has gone down, how bad he looks. And of course, he begins to think that he might die. He says, my pain is getting worse and worse. I cannot stop it. There was light, and now there's darkness. Now I'm gone. Where am I going? He says, this cannot be. I've done what I was supposed to do. Can I be dying? I don't want to die. What's the use? Death? None of them know or wish to know. They have no pity on me. But guess what? They're going to die too. He's superficial. He hates her because she doesn't love him anymore. And she kisses him on the cheek at night, or rather on the forehead, and we are told he hates her from the bottom of his soul. This is what we call a novella. It is very short. You should be able to read the rest of it after this introduction. It is not very long at all. Have a good day.